After playing the waiting game all week, politicians and journalists alike are poring over a highly controversial memo cleared for release by U.S. President Donald Trump. The document is about the FBI's conduct of its inquiry into alleged Russian meddling in the U.S. election. The Republican memo is out now, despite concerns within the intelligence agency. Here's what the president had to say in announcing he had declassified the information.
I think it's terrible. You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. The memo was sent to Congress. It was declassified. Congress will do whatever they're going to do. But I think it's a disgrace what's happening in our country. And when you look at that, and you see that, and so many other things, what's going on, a lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse.
Let's now go to the CBC's Ellen Morrow. She's outside the White House with more. So, Ellen, walk us through the memo and what stands out for you.
Well, Andrew, we've been talking about this memo for about a week now, waiting for it to be released, and it does essentially say what we thought it would, basically accusing the FBI and the Justice Department of being biased in favor of Democrats over Republicans and of improperly getting a surveillance to surveil Carter Page, a Trump campaign associate. Now, the reason the memo says this happened improperly was because it says the FBI and the Department of Justice relied on information from the Steele dossier in order to get that warrant. Now, just to remind everyone what the Steele dossier is, it is that research that was essentially funded by the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign that alleged links between the Trump campaign and Russia and some salacious accusations against President Trump. So the memo says that using that information to get the warrant was essentially a biased move. Now, that's one side to this. This is extremely political. This memo was written by a Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, someone who has been a supporter of the president, and Democrats who are on that committee who saw the same information that this memo was based on say that the memo mischaracterizes this highly classified information. And of course, throughout the week, we've heard from the FBI as well, which has expressed grave concerns about this memo, saying that there's omissions of fact that have impacted the memo's accuracy. So it's really hard to overstate just how political all of this has become, Andrew. And of course, the president this morning okayed the release of the memo in direct defiance of the Justice Department and the FBI. But that's not particularly a surprising move, given the amount of times he has talked about the FBI being biased against him in the past. And one other point, the Democrats are saying that this is part of an effort to undermine the ongoing Russia investigation.
And so, Ellen, we know that there's been a lot of reaction so far. What is the reaction to this point, and what's the likely fallout from this?
Well, there will probably be a lot of reaction coming through the day and through the coming days. Of course, we've heard from the president this morning saying that this was disgraceful, what happened. And Republicans who want this out there are saying this isn't about undermining the Russia investigation. This is about transparency and about oversight, and that the public should see this memo. But of course, the other side is saying that this is part of an ongoing effort to undermine the Russia investigation. And this isn't completely a partisan, Andrew, because there are some Republicans who have spoken out against this move today. We had a statement from John McCain earlier, and he said the latest attacks on the FBI and the Department of Justice serve no American interests, no parties, no presidents, only Putin's. Our nation's elected officials, including the president, must stop looking at this investigation through the warped lens of politics. So essentially what we now have here is an extremely political story, because as we know, the Democrats are also pushing for their memo to be released as well. So it'll be a battle of the memos, essentially. And what your guest was saying previously, that if you support Trump or if you don't, this memo is not likely to change your mind. And it is exactly what we thought it was going to say.
All right, Ellen, thank you. The CBC's Ellen Morrow in Washington. More on this, I'm joined by Jeffrey Ringel. He is a veteran of more than 20 years at the FBI. Currently, he's a director with the Sufin Group and joins me from New York. And in Sacramento, California, Kevin Eckery. He is a Republican strategist. Both men have been reviewing the memo since it came out last hour. So, Jeffrey, I'll start with you. What's your initial reaction to the memo?
Well, the memo looks like it just pretty much attacks the Steele dossier, the credibility of the Steele dossier, and doesn't really bring up any of the other facts that may have been used to support the FISA application. So they're taking one piece of the FISA application and using that to try to throw the whole application out. Having said that, I've not read the FISA application, so I don't know whether the facts were being used. But
and so, Jeffrey, just remind us, especially for our Canadian viewers who may not be following this as closely as Americans, who is Christopher Steele? Why is this important?
I guess Christopher Steele is a former British agent that was first hired by Republicans to dig up dirt on candidate Trump, and then was, I guess, changed bosses and worked for a DNC-affiliated law firm to continue that investigation into candidate Trump.
All right.
Now President Trump.
Yeah. Okay. So, Kevin, what was your initial reaction when you read the memo?
That it was a lot of hype, and it wasn't nearly what the president is trying to sell it as. I mean, it's a small snapshot of a small part of how a FISA warrant was asked for. It starts after Carter Page, who was the person that the warrant was issued for. It starts after he left the campaign, but it also doesn't talk about the fact that Carter Page had been under surveillance as early as 2013. So I don't know that this is the silver bullet that the administration was hoping for. I think that what they're now hoping for is that they can say this is out there, assert what's in it, and then to people who aren't going to read it and just will read headlines or listen to talking points, have it mean something to them. But this is a political document. It's just addressed at the base. It has nothing to do with advancing, the search for information at all.
Jeffrey, given what you've read from this memo, it was written by Nunes, by a Republican. Do you think that the FBI did overstep in its surveillance?
I do not, no. And having been involved in several FISAs, I know how difficult getting a FISA order is. And therefore, as Kevin has mentioned, Nunes took one little piece of the order and is using that for his argument. There are many, many other facts within that FISA application that had to be verified that in totality would basically support, again, looking into what Carter Page was doing.
So let's just step back again, Jeffrey. Again, apologize for just trying to keep this as simple as we can. But tell me about what a FISA warrant is and why that's challenging and difficult and the implications of this.
Well, basically in the U.S., there are two different types of searches you can do. You can do a criminal search warrant, which you have to then go to court and articulate in front of a judge with the facts why you want to go up and wire somebody's phone or conduct certain types of surveillance, and the court will then issue you that warrant, and that's based upon the you being able to articulate that there is some sort of criminal action being taken place, and that's why you need to do the surveillance. A FISA order, meanwhile, is not a criminal investigation. It is a counterintelligence investigation, and it's used when you think somebody is acting as an agent of a foreign power. And in order to have a FISA order, there has to be a foreign power that's basically directing the actions of the subject.
And so, Kevin, was there anything in this memo that surprised you?
No. I mean, the memo itself is, just to sort of expand on that, when you ask for a warrant, you have to put in, ultimately, what do you suspect the person of? How does this fit in? Give me some context. And even in the broadest possible definition, this in no way qualifies as the complete story to ask for a warrant. This wouldn't get you a warrant to investigate shoplifting, much less espionage.
And Jeffrey, let me ask you, do you feel as though this is about Trump maligning the FBI, at least the top brass at the FBI, and trying to undercut Special Counsel Mueller's investigation into Russian meddling into the presidential election?
I don't know. Well, I think this is to malign the FBI and to malign the investigation. But fortunately, this is not going to stop Director Mueller from his investigation. I think this is meant, as Kevin pointed out earlier, for people who are not going to look into the facts or not look past the headlines to basically use that to attack the FBI when there's nothing in this this memo that came out that really articulates any reason not to allow Director Mueller to continue to move forward.
Kevin, from a political perspective, do you believe that this will give Trump the cover that he thinks that he needs to potentially fire the Deputy Attorney General or Mr. Mueller himself?
No. I mean, this is just thin gruel, but it does bring up an interesting point, and the interesting point is that throughout the campaign, a lot of us who read the things he said, saw the things he said, paid close attention to the things Donald Trump said, were completely head-faked, because the people who support him are more concerned about what he represents in terms of potentialities. So, this is really nothing more than a distraction. I mean, this is for him to, build a platform so he can say he's a victim. But in terms of really impacting any investigations or really impacting the politics down deep, I honestly don't think so.
Jeffrey, was it inappropriate for this memo to have been released? Do you have concerns about the FBI being kind of dragged into this political mess?
I think it's inappropriate for the White House or for anybody in the federal government to attack the agencies and organizations that are the backbone of the federal government. So I find that inappropriate.
Kevin, where do you think this is going now?
I think that it's going into the Sunday chat shows, and that by next week we'll have 3 new news cycles.
Jeffrey?
I kind of agree. I don't think there's anything in this memo that warrants any further attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there were more meat here, Andrew, if it really called into question, a violation of the rights of U.S. citizens, or some, or on the other side, because my fear was that it would be revealing means and methods, which is, the ultimate reason that intelligence agencies and law enforcement protect information, because they don't want to know how you got it. This has ended up being an embarrassing piffle, but it's going to get sold by the White House as, the worst thing ever, and this president is the most crucified man since Christ himself, and this just proves it. But it doesn't do anything. I mean, this isn't going to change anything about Mueller. It's not going to change anything about the investigation, and it's not going to change anybody who supports Trump to not support him, or who opposes Trump to oppose him. It's not going to change anything.
Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey, just a final point to you, because you are a former, you did work for the FBI. How dangerous, or I'm trying to find the word here, what do you make of this relationship that the President of the United States now has with the FBI?
Well, as I've said before, this is not the first time that the FBI and the White House don't get along. Fortunately, the people in the FBI are professionals at the street level. They will continue to do their job. They will continue to support the Constitution, uphold the rule of law. It's not good that they're getting beat up in the press and possibly by some of their neighbors, but the FBI will weather this and keep moving forward.
I want to thank you both very much. Interesting discussion. Thank you. That is
Thank
Jeffrey
you.
Ringel, is a former FBI investigator. He was in New York. And Kevin Eckery is a Republican strategist. He joined us from Sacramento, California.